Imagine a firefighter in his 30s, facing flames and danger every single day, whose life suddenly changes because of an event he never expected. A large library catches fire, and almost all the books are reduced to ashes except for one Qur'an that remains perfectly intact. That moment becomes the beginning of his spiritual journey. Driven by curiosity, he starts learning about Islam, meets an elderly imam who guides him, and eventually discovers faith, love, and family. This story is not just about a fire or bravery, it's about destiny, light in the darkness, and how a single moment can transform a person's entire life. In this video, we'll follow the extraordinary journey of Ramad, a firefighter who found faith and love through a Qur'an that survived the flames, and how his life changed forever. On a summer night, the dark sky was covered by smoke rolling out of a large library that was burning fiercely. Sirens wailed, and red and blue lights reflected off the windows of nearby buildings. In the middle of the chaos, a man in his 30s named Ramad jumped down from a fire truck, wearing his full gear heavy and scorching hot. He had done this job for years and thought that night would be just like any other. Danger, adrenaline, then exhaustion. It never occurred to him that something that night would change his life. The library was known for its collection of old manuscripts and its massive reading hall. But the fire spread so quickly that most of the building had begun to collapse. Ramad and his team rushed in from the eastern side of the building, the only path still accessible. The thick smoke made visibility no more than a few steps. His body was drenched in sweat despite the heat and dryness in the air. He focused solely on searching for victims and containing the fire. As he approached the main hall of the library, Ramad saw shelves that had fallen, turning into piles of charred wood. Boxes, papers, and cloth wraps for old manuscripts had turned to ash. Flames leapt from one side to the other. Ramad moved the light on his helmet, searching for an opening to go deeper. Suddenly, part of the ceiling cracked loudly, and a large beam of wood fell not far from him. He stepped back several times to avoid the debris. But amid the chaos, his eyes caught something different. On a small table, partly blackened by the fire, there was a dark-colored object that was not burned. The flames that had been devouring the table seemed to fade around that object, as if held back by an invisible barrier. Ramad squinted, trying to make sure it wasn't just an illusion created by smoke and firelight. He approached, swinging a small hose to push aside the embers. When he was only a few steps away, he saw that the object was a copy of the Qur'an. Its cover was dusty and slightly browned, but its pages were intact. No burn marks, no blackened corners. Almost every other book in the room had turned to ash. Ramad froze. His heart pounded harder than before. He was not a Muslim. Since childhood, he rarely thought about spiritual matters. Life, to him, was hard work, monthly paychecks, and occasional short entertainment to forget the fatigue. But that sight made him feel as if time had stopped. Something pierced through the bounds of logic and the calculations he had relied on as an experienced firefighter. Carefully, he picked up the Qur'an. As his hand touched the cover, Ramad felt a strange sensation, like a calm slowly seeping into him. There was no sound except the rumbling of the fire, which was beginning to die down thanks to the other teams. But in his mind, a sense of peace arose, something he couldn't explain. He carried the Qur'an outside. Some of his colleagues stared, wide-eyed, seeing the book still intact while their own uniforms were covered in ash. One of them asked how the book could have survived. Ramad only shook his head. He didn't understand it himself. That night, after the task was complete and the truck returned to the station, Ramad sat alone in the locker room. He placed the Qur'an on his lap. A sense of curiosity urged him to open its pages. Though he didn't understand the language written inside, he felt as though something was calling to him. In the days that followed, his curiosity grew. He sought the meaning of the verses through an old acquaintance, a Muslim. Explanations about the meaning of life, compassion, and justice slowly changed his heart. Months passed. Ramad began to study the teachings of Islam more deeply. He read translations, attended study gatherings, and discussed his thoughts with the people he met. There was no pressure, no persuasion from anyone, only an inner journey that began with an event he could never forget. One bright morning, a friend from the fire station told him about an old imam who lived not far from Ramad's home. The imam was known for his wisdom, patience, and gentle approach in teaching many people about the faith. Ramad felt a strong urge to meet someone who could guide him further. He decided to visit the mosque where the old imam usually taught. The mosque was simple, surrounded by shady trees and a small, clean courtyard. When Ramad stepped inside, its peaceful atmosphere calmed his heart. Inside, an old man with a white beard was sweeping the floor in slow movements. His body looked frail, yet there was a soothing aura about him that made people want to come closer. Ramad greeted him softly. The old imam stopped sweeping and looked at Ramad with a warm smile. His gaze seemed to understand that Ramad carried a burden and a search within him. Without many questions, the imam invited Ramad to sit with him. Ramad told him about his spiritual journey, about the Qur'an that survived the fire, about how his feelings had changed, and about his desire to understand God more deeply. The old imam listened with full attention. Whenever Ramad paused because his emotions were rising, the imam simply gave a gentle nod, as if he understood without lengthy explanations. The old imam then said that every person has a different door to divine guidance. Some find it through long journeys, some through heavy trials, and some through a single event that shakes the heart. He said that perhaps what Ramad experienced was a sign that he was being guided toward the light he had unknowingly sought all along. From that day on, Ramad regularly came to the mosque. He learned to read the Qur'an, from the basic letters to reciting the verses correctly. The old imam taught him with extraordinary patience. Sometimes Ramad struggled to learn certain letters, but the imam always said that every letter learned was a step toward deeper self-understanding. Between lessons, the old imam often spoke about character, about the importance of being kind to others, and about the tranquility that comes from sincerity. His teachings were not only readings but also perspectives on life. Ramad felt a great change within himself. The pressures of life that once made him anxious now felt lighter. He began to understand that true strength did not come only from muscle or courage to face fire, but also from steadfastness of heart and a connection with the Creator. Time continued to pass. Ramad's relationship with the old imam grew into one like that of a student with a loving father. Every day he learned something new, whether knowledge or life's wisdom. Sometimes they sat for hours discussing the meaning of certain verses. Sometimes they simply talked about daily life, which turned out to hold many lessons. One afternoon after a lesson, the old imam looked at Ramad for a long moment. He said that one day Ramad would become someone who not only transformed himself, but who would also change the lives of others through kindness and steadfast faith. Ramad fell silent. He had never imagined such a thing. But the imam's words settled deep in his heart and became motivation for him to keep learning. The following year, Ramad became one of the most active congregants in the mosque. He helped clean the mosque, delivered food for social activities, and even began guiding young people about the importance of courage and kindness. Without realizing it, his own life story had become an inspiration to many. And every time he opened the Qur'an he had once found amid the flames, Ramad remembered how a book untouched by fire had led him on a long journey toward the light. He now knew that the night of the fire had not been just another dangerous assignment, but the doorway to a new life. His story is not over. Ramad continues to learn, to strive, and to strengthen himself. But one thing is certain. In his heart, he always carries the old imam's words that sometimes, within the fire that seems to destroy, God has hidden a path to salvation. Ramad finally recited the Shahada one calm afternoon in the mosque where he had been studying with the old imam. His voice was steady yet trembling, like a man who had found his way home after being lost for so long. The congregants who were present welcomed him warmly. The old imam gently patted his shoulder and said that now the real journey had only just begun. From that moment on, Ramad spent even more time at the mosque. He felt that the place was no longer just a house of worship, but also a home for his newly growing heart. Every morning before reporting for duty, he stopped by to help the old imam open the doors, arrange the prayer mats, and turn on the fans. Sometimes he arrived early just to sit for a moment in the main hall, feeling the calm that seeped through its floors and walls. The old imam noticed Ramad's great enthusiasm. He began teaching Ramad not only how to read the Qur'an, but also how to slowly understand its meaning. They sat together in a corner of the mosque in the late afternoon, sunlight slipping through the windows and illuminating the pages of the mushaf they read. Ramad often paused at certain verses and asked about their deeper meaning. The imam explained gently, with examples and stories, making Ramad feel as though the verses were speaking directly to him. Ramad also began helping with the mosque's activities. He cleaned the gutters, painted the fence, and carried heavy carpets during major cleanings. The old imam often asked Ramad to accompany him when visiting congregants who were ill. Through these activities, Ramad learned that Islam was not only about acts of worship, but also about caring for others with a sincere heart. One day, the old imam did not appear at the mosque during their study time. Ramad went to the small house beside the mosque courtyard to look for him. The imam was sitting in a wooden chair, looking a little weary. Ramad immediately helped make warm water and tidy up the yard. From that moment, he realized that the imam needed more assistance. He began arranging his schedule so he could always be available to help, even after long shifts fighting fires. The old imam often said that Ramad was like a new light for the mosque. His presence encouraged the youth to come more often, while the elderly congregants felt supported. Ramad never considered himself special. He only did what he believed was right. Yet without realizing it, those small acts of kindness were transforming the mosque into a livelier, warmer place. One gentle afternoon, as the sunlight neared sunset and the mosque began to quiet down, Ramad was helping sweep the courtyard. The breeze carried the scent of earth and flowers from the small garden beside the mosque. That was when he saw a young woman walking slowly into the courtyard. She carried a bag filled with food for the old imam. The woman wore simple clothing and a soft hijab that fluttered in the wind. Her gaze was calm, and her movements were full of respect. Ramad intended to lower his eyes as he had always been taught, but for a brief moment, he saw her face, and his heart was struck with a feeling he had never known before. The woman was Aisha, the old imam's daughter, who lived in another city and rarely visited. She came to see her father on weekends. When she entered the back room of the mosque, she saw Ramad helping carry a bucket of water for ablution. Aisha greeted him, and Ramad responded in a calm voice, though his heart was racing. A few more times, Aisha returned. Each visit, Ramad noticed how lovingly she treated her father, preparing warm tea, tidying blankets, giving medicine. She spoke softly and respectfully. Ramad began to understand that piety was not only reflected in worship, but also in how one treated family and others. The old imam observed the small changes in Ramad. He saw how Ramad nervously adjusted his turban when Aisha came, or how he suddenly became more meticulous while sweeping the courtyard. The imam smiled silently. He had long seen the light within Ramad, and seeing Aisha's good character, he sensed that perhaps Allah had prepared something for both of them. One afternoon after Asr prayer, the old imam called Ramad to sit with him on the mosque's veranda. The evening breeze swayed the leaves. The imam began by asking whether Ramad felt comfortable learning alongside Aisha over the past few days, as sometimes they helped each other carry items or prepare meals. Ramad was startled, his face turning red. He tried to say that he only wanted to help, with no other intentions. But the old imam laughed softly, a laugh full of wisdom. "If your heart feels at peace seeing her, that is not something you need to hide," said the imam. Ramad lowered his gaze. In his heart, he knew he had fallen in love, but he was afraid to speak, feeling unworthy of the daughter of a teacher he respected. After a long pause, he gathered his courage. In a quiet yet firm voice, Ramad said that if Allah permitted, he wished to propose to Aisha in a good and honorable manner. He demanded nothing and was willing to accept whatever answer the old imam would give. He simply wanted to convey his intention sincerely. The old imam looked at Ramad with eyes glistening. He knew well the journey Ramad had undertaken from the great fire that changed his life to becoming someone he now regarded as his own child. He patted Ramad's shoulder and said he would convey the intention to Aisha, but the decision was entirely up to his daughter. The next day, Aisha returned. The old imam spoke gently to his daughter about Ramad's intention. Aisha's face flushed, but she did not refuse. She knew Ramad as a polite, diligent young man who deeply respected her father. Ramad's profound transformation made her trust that he had a sincere and good heart. A few days later, the old imam called Ramad and told him that Aisha accepted the proposal, on the condition that the wedding be simple and full of blessings. Ramad could hardly believe it. Tears fell freely. He prostrated in gratitude at the mosque, feeling as if all the burdens of his life had been lifted. Their marriage was held simply in the mosque filled with memories for Ramad. Congregants came bearing prayers. The old imam directly officiated the ceremony, his voice trembling with joy. Ramad embraced this responsibility with a heart full of gratitude. Aisha smiled from behind the curtain, her face radiating serenity. That day, Ramad felt his life had come full circle. From the fire that nearly took everything, he found faith. From faith, he found a teacher. And through that guidance, he found sincere love. In Ramad's heart, there was one strong certainty. Allah had arranged everything in a way he could never have imagined. And together with Aisha and the old imam, he began a new chapter of life filled with light, love, and devotion. Several years after their marriage, Ramad and Aisha were blessed with a healthy baby boy. The arrival of their child brought immeasurable joy. Ramad, who had once been consumed only by his duties as a firefighter, now experienced a new depth of love as a father. He often held his son in the mosque courtyard, teaching him simple prayers and recounting the story of his life journey, including the night of the fire that had changed everything. Aisha became a devoted partner, instilling values of character and patience while maintaining their household with exemplary care. The mosque, which had once been merely a place to study and assist the old imam, now also bore witness to the happiness of their little family. Ramad continued to attend to his firefighting duties diligently, but his heart was now tied to his home, family, and his new responsibilities as a parent. Time passed. The old imam, who had guided Ramad and Aisha for so long, began to show signs of old age. One morning, after far prayer, Ramad and Aisha found him sitting on the mosque veranda, appearing weak but at peace. Ramad helped him into the main hall, where he settled into his favorite chair. The old imam smiled at the couple, his eyes radiating serenity. A few weeks later, the old imam passed away peacefully at his home, surrounded by family, Ramad, Aisha, and congregants who came to pay their last respects. Ramad felt a profound sense of loss, yet he was grateful to have had the opportunity to learn from and be guided by such a wise teacher. He looked at the Qur'an that had once survived the fire and felt that all the lessons from the old imam had become priceless treasures that he must continue to uphold. After the funeral, Ramad took on a greater role at the mosque. He guided the congregants, taught children to read the Qur'an, and helped those in need, just as the old imam had taught him. Ramad's family life was now filled with love, knowledge, and service. Their son grew up in an environment imbued with faith and compassion, while Ramad continuously instilled the values he had learned from his late teacher. At night, after all duties were done and the house was quiet, Ramad often sat alone holding the Qur'an that had survived the fire, reflecting on the long journey of his life. He smiled inwardly, realizing that from the fire, faith, guidance, love, and family, everything had come together into a life full of blessings and meaning. He prayed that his son would one day follow the straight path, uphold the legacy of knowledge and goodness left by the old imam, and become a bearer of goodness for others. That was the journey of Ramad, a firefighter who discovered faith, love, and family through a Qur'an that survived a fire. This story reminds us that sometimes small or unexpected moments can change someone's life forever, and that goodness and sincerity always leave a lasting mark. Keep in mind, the story shared in this video is not a true story, but a fictional tale inspired by the values of life, faith, and devotion. Its purpose is to inspire and deliver a positive message to all of us. If you felt inspired by this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you won't miss other inspiring tales. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.